Blood on the Blue Nile. A river cruise becomes deadly when a jealous heart ends in murder. The Nile had a way of holding secrets. Its waters moved with ancient patience, carrying centuries of whispers beneath their surface, smoothing over every sin, every crime, every body that had ever been claimed by its depths. When I boarded the Hathor Queen, a river cruiser draped in elegance and shadows, I did not yet know that I was stepping into a story that would stain me forever. The invitation had come in a way too grand for me to decline, an all-expenses-paid voyage down the Nile, a promise of moonlit dinners, lectures on ancient history, and the kind of luxury travel that belonged in glossy magazines. I had been a travel journalist for years, but rarely did opportunities like this arise. The company that managed the cruise wanted coverage in a British publication, and my editor thought me perfect for the job. The truth was, I needed the escape. My personal life was a wreck, and the quiet terror of a failed relationship haunted every corner of my apartment. So I packed quickly, boarded a flight to Cairo, and stepped aboard the Hathor Queen with the weight of hope and dread tangled inside me. The passengers were as glittering and varied as the Nile itself. Wealthy tourists in linen suits and silk scarves, academics clutching notebooks, couples in the early blush of romance, and others whose smiles were more practiced than genuine. And then there was her, Isabella Marlowe. She was impossible to ignore. Tall, striking, her auburn hair catching every flicker of light, she moved through the lounge like a flame cutting across shadow. Her laughter carried easily, low and rich, but there was something in her eyes that unsettled me, something sharp, restless, as if she were constantly measuring who adored her most. By her side lingered Edward Marlowe, her husband, though he looked less like a partner and more like an anchor she had long since grown tired of dragging. His expression carried the tightness of a man accustomed to humiliation, his eyes lingering too long on his drink. I noticed him watching Isabella more than anyone else did. Or perhaps I noticed because I knew the look of jealousy too well. It had once been my own. The first night passed with the kind of splendor cruises like this were designed to offer. The dining hall glittered with chandeliers, and the Nile slid silently past the windows, black and endless. There were speeches, introductions, a toast from the captain. Yet beneath the surface hum of polite conversation, I sensed tension, invisible threads pulling tight. Isabella laughed a little too brightly when one of the professors complimented her gown. Edward's hand tightened around his glass until his knuckles whitened. I told myself I was imagining things, that my own fractured past made me see cracks where none existed. But I was wrong. It began with a whispered argument. I overheard it while walking back to my cabin late that night. Their voices, muffled behind a closed door, carried with the weight of venom. Isabella accused him of suffocating her, of turning love into a prison. Edward replied in clipped tones, words filled with the rage of a man who knew he was losing what he most desired. I didn't linger. It wasn't my place, but the echoes followed me back to my room, settling into my bones like a warning. The following days unfolded like a dream painted in gold. We docked at Luxor, walked among towering temples, and watched the sun burn the desert sky into fire. Passengers smiled, drank champagne, and posed for photographs. But in stolen glances and quiet moments I saw the truth. Edward shadowing Isabella, Isabella drifting into the orbit of anyone who admired her beauty. She was the sun, and she knew it. He was the shadow, and it was destroying him. It all reached its breaking point on the fourth night. The evening had begun with music on the upper deck, a string quartet playing beneath the stars. The Nile stretched endless and black beneath us, the banks fading into silence. Glasses clinked, laughter spilled, and for a moment it seemed the unease had faded. Until the scream came. It sliced through the music, sharp and chilling, silencing every note. People turned, gasps breaking out as the crowd parted. On the starboard side of the deck, Isabella Marlowe stood at the railing, her face pale, her hands clutching desperately. Edward was gone. Only the churn of the river remained where he had been standing moments before. Chaos erupted. Passengers shouted. Crew rushed to the railings. Searchlights cut across the river. But the Nile swallowed everything. No trace of him surfaced, not even a hand reaching for help. Isabella collapsed into sobs, her beauty broken by fear and grief. Yet there was something strange in her performance. Her tears came too quickly, her gasps too theatrical. I had seen actors deliver more convincing anguish. The widow's mask she wore was too polished, too neat. And as I stood there gripping the railing, staring into the dark waters that had claimed Edward Marlowe. A thought rooted itself inside me. This was no accident. The Nile was not the only thing hiding secrets tonight. The first night aboard the Eternal Horizon settled over the Nile like a velvet curtain. Lanterns glowed faintly on the open-air deck, casting pools of gold upon polished wood. Guests gathered beneath a star-pinned sky, their laughter mingling with the lapping current. Yet beneath the elegance, threads of unease stitched themselves tighter into the night. Amira reclined at the long dining table draped in ivory linen, her slender fingers circling the stem of a wineglass. The candlelight caught the sapphire pendant at her throat, its brilliance almost too bold for so modest a gathering. Around her, conversations ebbed and flowed, but her gaze rarely strayed from Victor. Victor, sun-bronzed and broad-shouldered, sat opposite her. He leaned close to Lena, whispering into her ear. Lena's soft laugh spilled into the air, like a bell out of place in the solemn river night. Amira's expression flickered, the faintest shadow of jealousy hidden beneath a smile that never reached her eyes. To their left, Dr. Farouk entertained with tales of excavations and relics pulled from the desert. He spoke of tombs and curses half in jest, half in warning, as though ancient spirits might be listening. Beside him, Marianne, wrapped in a shawl of crimson silk, seemed more interested in the glint of her gold bracelets than his words. Her narrowed eyes followed every move Lena made, though her lips curved in polite amusement. The captain raised his glass to call for a toast. His voice carried with authority, though softened by age, to journeys down this timeless river. May the waters carry us safely, and may the gods of Egypt look kindly upon our passage. Crystal chimed in unison, though beneath the ring of glass was another resonance, an almost imperceptible tension winding through the group. Amira's lips brushed her glass, though she scarcely drank. She watched Lena, saw the way Victor's hand rested near hers on the table, close enough for chance to be mistaken for intent. A pulse of heat burned within her chest, hidden by a mask of grace. She thought of the whispered words Victor once spoke beneath palm trees in Cairo, words now betrayed by this laughing intimacy. The evening unfolded in languid courses of roasted lamb, fragrant rice and figs dripping with honey, the scent of spices carried on the night breeze, rich and cloying. Candles guttered as the ship swayed gently with the current. Yet beneath the indulgence, eyes sharpened, silences lengthened, and the air grew heavy with unspoken things. Near the end of the meal, a hush fell. A sound broke the rhythm of chatter, a glass tipping over, wine spilling across linen like a spreading wound. Gasps followed, though quickly softened into laughter. The captain gestured to a steward, who replaced the stained cloth with practiced ease. Yet the moment lingered, a crimson mark etched into memory. Amira excused herself from the table soon after, her gown trailing behind her like a shadow. She ascended to the deck above, where the night air was cooler, where the stars mirrored themselves in the Nile's dark waters. She leaned against the rail, breathing in the stillness. Below, she could still hear Victor's laughter, Lena's softer echo beside it. Her grip tightened on the rail until her knuckles whitened. She thought of what she had given, of what she had risked, and she thought of how easily it could be taken from her. Later, when the guests retired to their cabins, the ship grew hushed save for the murmur of the river. Curtains stirred with the breeze, lanterns dimmed, and silence stretched like an unbroken thread. Somewhere far off, a dog barked from the distant shore. Amira lay in her cabin staring at the ceiling. Her thoughts churned with images. Victor's hand brushing Lena's eyes glittering beneath candlelight. Victor's smile that once belonged only to her. The walls seemed too close, the air too thick. She rose, slipping into a robe, and crossed the narrow corridor. Through the half-open door of Lena's cabin, she caught the faintest murmur of conversation. Victor's voice, low, intimate, unmistakable. The sound was a knife. Amira stepped back silent, the fury in her chest burning cold now, icy and deliberate. She returned to her cabin without a sound, but she did not sleep. She sat by the window, staring at the river, and thought of the ancient stories Dr. Farouk had told, of jealous queens, betrayed goddesses, and vengeance sealed in blood. Morning would bring sunlight on the river, laughter on the deck, and polite civility at breakfast. Yet in the shadows of night something darker took root, the kind of thought that lingers, sharpens, and waits for its moment. Somewhere between the stars above and the current below, a silent vow was made. And when such vows are whispered to the Nile, they seldom go unanswered. The Nile woke before the guests did. Mist clung to the water's surface, curling like smoke from a hidden fire. The eternal horizon drifted quietly past groves of palm and clusters of white egrets. From the horizon the sun crept upward, painting the river in molten gold. The serenity outside did not echo within. Inside the cabins rest had been broken, dreams unsettled. Amira had not closed her eyes, her mind turning like the restless current beneath the hull. She rose before dawn, dressed in flowing linen, and stepped onto the deck as the first call of birds reached the air. The cool wind brushed her skin, yet no chill could temper the heat that gnawed at her chest. She watched the river as if searching for an omen. The water whispered as though it knew her secret vow. Somewhere, she thought, the Nile had seen betrayals like hers 1,000 times before. It had swallowed queens and kings alike, carried blood with the same indifference as it carried the dawn. By the time the other passengers gathered for breakfast, the mood was lighter than the night before. The dining salon smelled of strong coffee, dates, and warm bread. Sunlight streamed through the wide windows, scattering across polished brass. Victor entered last, Lena on his arm. Their laughter was not hidden now, but free and careless. Amira felt her jaw tighten, though she smiled as though nothing touched her heart. Marianne's eyes flickered at the sight, a shadow of disdain crossing her features. Dr. Farouk was already speaking. His hands animated as he described their next excursion, a visit to a riverside temple, half-ruined yet majestic, where carvings of gods still whispered stories in stone. He spoke of the goddess Isis, betrayed and grieving, who pieced together her husband's body from the river's fragments. His words, though intended as lecture, resonated like prophecy. Amira's gaze shifted toward Lena. She noticed the faint smudge of crimson along the edge of her sleeve, no larger than a petal. Wine, perhaps, from the spilled glass. Or something else. A small thing. Yet Amira felt her breath catch. Symbols appeared to her where none might exist, patterns woven by suspicion. The captain, stern and formal even at breakfast, noticed the lull. He raised his cup. "We are blessed with calm waters today. The Nile is merciful. Let us enjoy its grace while it lasts." His words were plain, yet to Amira they sounded like warning. Grace never lasted. After the meal, the passengers disembarked for the temple. The air outside was heavy with heat, the stone steps radiating warmth even in morning light. Shadows clung to the carvings on the walls, gods with falcon heads, queens with serpent crowns, eyes that seemed to watch as the group moved deeper into the ruins. Victor guided Lena by the hand, leading her toward a broken statue. Amira trailed behind, her own footsteps echoing against ancient stone. She watched the way Lena's hair caught the sun, the way Victor's hand lingered at her waist, each detail pressed against her heart like thorns. Dr. Farouk lectured on hieroglyphs, pointing to depictions of feasts, offerings, and sacrifices. "Here," he said, tracing the carved figure of a queen holding a knife above a rival's heart. Jealousy was not merely an emotion to them. It was power, divine and terrible. Those who crossed the queens of Egypt often met their fate beneath such blades. The group laughed nervously, but Amira did not. She stared at the carving until the edges blurred. When they returned to the ship that afternoon, the atmosphere had shifted. The light-hearted chatter of the morning was thinner now, stretched taut by invisible threads. Marianne had withdrawn into silence, her shawl pulled tighter, her gaze always flicking toward Lena. Dr. Farouk scribbled notes furiously in a leather-bound journal, though his eyes lingered on Victor more often than his paper. The hours passed slowly. As twilight fell, the eternal horizon anchored near a quiet village where lanterns glowed faintly along the shore. The passengers dined once more beneath a canopy of stars. This time, the laughter was brittle, the smiles sharper. Even the captain seemed to watch them with the wariness of a man who had ferried secrets before. Amira lifted her glass but did not drink. She studied the others, searching for cracks in their masks. Marianne whispered to the steward, her words hushed but urgent. Victor poured wine for Lena, his hand steady, his smile disarming. The air felt too close, the night too still. Then came the sound. A sharp crack like glass against wood. Every head turned. At the far end of the table, Marianne's glass had split, a jagged edge cutting her palm. Blood welled crimson against her pale skin, dripping onto the white cloth below. Gasps filled the air. The steward rushed forward with cloths, binding her hand as Marianne hissed through clenched teeth. She brushed away Victor's offer of help, her eyes burning with quiet rage. The blood, stark under lantern light, spread across the linen. It seemed to ripple, to stain more deeply than it should. To Amira, it was not an accident. It was a warning, a sign of what was to come. The captain's voice broke the silence. Accidents happen. We will see that you are tended to, madam. But his eyes told another story. He had seen tension aboard his ship before, and he knew where it led. When the guests retired that night, the river seemed darker, heavier. Amira stood at her cabin window staring at the water. She thought of the broken glass, of the blood pooling on white cloth, of ancient queens who took vengeance into their own hands. The vow she had made in silence grew louder in her chest. It pulsed with every heartbeat, filling the night with its certainty. The Nile carried the ship onward, steady and relentless. Somewhere in its depths it seemed to whisper that it was ready to bear witness when the first body fell. The night air was heavy, pressing against the ship like a velvet curtain. The Nile lay silent, only the occasional ripple breaking its surface as if stirred by unseen hands. Lanterns along the deck flickered in the darkness, their reflections stretching across the water like thin, wavering blades. Inside the eternal horizon, most of the passengers had retired. Cabins glowed faintly through narrow windows, the light soft and private. Yet the corridors carried whispers, quiet footsteps, the scrape of a chair, a door closing with unusual care. Secrets stirred in the dark. Amira lay on her bed, but sleep refused her. The image of Marianne's bleeding hand haunted her thoughts, crimson seeping into linen, spreading like an omen. Her vow, once silent, now seemed to echo in the stillness. Someone would pay. Whether by her hand or by fates, the Nile would not stay innocent. A sound jolted her upright, a muffled thud not far from her cabin. Then silence. She rose, slipped a shawl over her shoulders, and opened the door. The corridor was dim, shadows pooling where the lanterns failed. She hesitated, listening. Nothing. And yet, something lingered, like the scent of danger left behind. She stepped softly down the hall, her bare feet almost noiseless on the carpet. A door stood ajar ahead, Victor's. Her heart stuttered. She pushed it gently, peering inside. The cabin was empty, bed untouched. The curtains swayed faintly as if someone had passed through only moments earlier. Footsteps echoed behind her. She spun and Dr. Farouk appeared, journal clutched tightly in his hand. His eyes widened at the sight of her. Couldn't sleep? His voice was steady, but the question felt weighted. I heard something, she said, cautious. He glanced toward Victor's room, then back at her. Strange. I thought I heard a cry. Faint, but he let the words hang, unfinished. Together they followed the narrow stairs to the deck. The night was darker there, the stars veiled by drifting clouds. The river lapped against the hull, its rhythm almost too calm. Then they saw it, a figure sprawled near the stern, half hidden by shadow. At first, Amira thought it was someone fainting from drink, but as they drew closer, dread took hold. It was Lena. Her body lay twisted, hair spilling across the deck like a golden veil. A broken glass rested near her hand, shards glittering faintly. Dr. Farouk knelt beside her, pressing fingers to her neck. His expression hardened. He looked up at Amira, his voice low. She's gone. The words seemed to tear the night open. Amira's breath caught. Her chest pounded as she stared down at the still form. There was no wound that she could see, no blade, no blood. Only the faint scent of almonds lingering in the air, sharp and unmistakable. Poison, Dr. Farouk whispered, his tone grim. This was no accident. The sound of hurried footsteps broke their silence. The captain arrived, followed closely by Marianne and Victor. Victor's face drained of color as his gaze fell on Lena. He dropped to his knees, shaking her shoulders, calling her name in a voice cracked with disbelief. She was fine, he shouted, eyes wild. She was laughing, she was alive. The captain's expression was grave. He signaled to the steward, who rushed to fetch blankets. We must cover her. We must remain calm. His voice carried the weight of authority, but underneath it ran a thread of unease. Marianne's eyes glittered in the lantern light. She clutched her bandaged hand to her chest, her lips trembling, though whether from shock or something else was unclear. She looked at Victor with a gaze that bordered on accusation, yet she said nothing. Amira stood apart, her shawl wrapped tight, heart hammering. A part of her wanted to wail, to grieve. Another part whispered that this was the path she had foreseen. A vow answered, not by her hand, but by another's. The captain straightened, his gaze sweeping over them. This ship is now a crime scene. No one leaves their cabins tonight. At dawn, we will decide how to proceed. Victor exploded, rising to his feet. You think you can trap us here? Someone killed her! He jabbed a finger toward the river. toward the dark horizon. "What if they strike again?" "They already have," the captain said firmly. His tone left no room for argument. "The Nile hides many sins, but not without witness. Until the truth is found, we are all suspects." The passengers were led back inside under the captain's watch. The corridors, once merely silent, now pulsed with dread. Every door that closed seemed to echo with suspicion. Amira lay awake once more, staring at the ceiling as the ship drifted forward. Lena's lifeless face burned in her mind. The faint scent of almonds clung to her thoughts, sweet and bitter at once. The Nile carried them onward, as steady as fate itself, and though Lena's body was gone, her absence weighed heavier than her presence ever had. By dawn, one truth was certain. The eternal horizon was no longer a vessel of leisure. It was a floating coffin, and the river was not done with them yet. Dawn crept over the Nile in shades of pale gold, the river's surface catching the first fragile light. From the deck of the eternal horizon, the world seemed momentarily cleansed, yet beneath that stillness lingered the knowledge of the night's death. The passengers gathered once more in the dining salon. No one touched the food laid before them. Silverware lay untouched, coffee cooled in porcelain cups. Faces were drawn, shadows beneath the eyes of each guest betraying sleepless hours. The ship itself seemed to breathe slower, burdened by what it carried. The captain stood at the head of the table, his posture rigid. He announced that Lena's body had been secured in the cold storage below deck, and that at the next port, authorities would board to investigate. Until then, no one would leave and no one would be trusted. His voice carried authority, but even he knew that the murderer was among them. Victor's hand shook as he poured himself a glass of water. His grief had hardened into rage. He demanded answers, demanded justice. His voice cracked as he swore that he would not rest until Lena's killer was found. But his fury only served to draw eyes upon him, the man who had been closest to the victim, the man whose affection for her had been no secret. Marianne leaned forward, her crimson shawl slipping from one shoulder. She reminded the table of Victor's late-night absences, his whispered words to Lena when others were not meant to hear. Her tone was smooth, but her eyes gleamed with venom. Dr. Farouk countered, recalling the broken glass and the bitter scent that clung to Lena's body. Poison was not the weapon of a lover in passion. It was the weapon of patience, of cunning. He spoke with the certainty of one who had studied death in both history and flesh. His gaze drifted toward Amira, quiet and composed at the far end of the table. Amira felt the weight of their eyes. She had not slept, but her exhaustion lent her a serenity that unnerved them. She lifted her glass with steady fingers, though she did not drink. Her thoughts swirled like the Nile below them. Had her wish been carried out by another's hand? Or had she herself planted suspicion so effectively that guilt now wandered freely from one guest to the next? The captain demanded order, but suspicion had already loosened restraint. Marianne accused Amira of jealousy, pointing to the way her gaze had lingered on Lena. Victor snapped at Marianne, accusing her of malice, of envy that had festered long before they boarded. Dr. Farouk reminded them all of the ancient tales he had shared, that the Nile listened, and sometimes it answered with blood. The air thickened with accusations, each voice sharper, louder. Silver clattered against china, fists struck the table. The civility of the crews dissolved, leaving only raw nerves and the trembling truth that none of them could be certain of the others. And then came the scream. A steward burst into the room, eyes wide, voice choked. He stammered that Marianne's cabin door had been forced open, that she lay on the floor, lifeless. They rushed to her quarters. The sight was worse than Lena's serene stillness. Marianne's face was twisted in agony, her lips blue, her hands clawing at the carpet as though she had tried to drag herself toward the door. On the bedside table sat an untouched cup of tea, steam still curling faintly from its rim. The captain's face hardened. "It is poison again," he said, "and whoever wields it is still here among us." The room seemed to contract, suffocating in its silence. 2 deaths in 2 nights. No longer could chance or misfortune be considered. This was a pattern, deliberate and relentless. Victor fell to his knees beside Marianne, his voice hoarse with disbelief. He swore he had been with the captain when the scream was heard. Dr. Farouk swore the same. Their alibis intertwined, unbreakable, which left Amira, eyes turned to her. Her calmness, once a shield, now betrayed her. The sapphire at her throat caught the dim light as if mocking the accusation it drew. She did not protest. She simply met their stares, unflinching. The captain ordered her cabin searched. Drawers were emptied, trunks overturned, and there, hidden in the lining of a travel case, lay a small vial, clear glass. a liquid inside, faintly sweet to the nose. Almond. The verdict was unspoken but unanimous. Amira's lips curved into the faintest smile, not of joy but of something darker, acceptance, inevitability. She said nothing, for words were no longer needed. The Nile had taken her vow and turned it into reality. The captain declared that she would be confined until they reached the next port, where she would be handed to the authorities. But as they led her away, a sudden lurch rocked the ship. The steward shouted from above. Rocks in the channel, currents shifting fast. In the chaos, Amira pulled free, darting toward the deck. The others followed, their shouts tearing across the dawn air. She reached the stern, shawl whipping in the wind, the river stretching endless and eternal behind her. She looked back once, her eyes burning with something unreadable. Sorrow, fury, freedom. Then she leapt. The water swallowed her in silence, leaving only ripples where she had vanished. Victor cried out, leaning over the rail, but the river gave nothing back. The captain's voice rang heavy with finality. The Nile has claimed her, and so it ended. 2 bodies below deck, 1 lost to the depths, and a ship that would never be the same. The eternal horizon sailed on, its name now a curse, carrying survivors bound forever by what they had witnessed. The Nile flowed, ancient and indifferent, as though it had seen this all before. This, my dear friends, is the end of this story. Stay with us for the next one, and don't forget to subscribe for more chilling audiobooks.